We have a very exciting program up ahead, but before we get to any of our plays, I am very excited and very honored to introduce renowned musical theater lyricist Susan Birkenhead. Since her Broadway debut as a songwriter for Working in 1979, which earned her her first Tony nomination, Susan has had a celebrated career working on musicals like Jelly's Last Jam, Triumph of Love, High Society, and Monsoon Wedding. Her list of awards and accolades is nearly as long as her body of work, and The New Yorker has described her as one of the best contemporary female lyricists. Susan is also deeply involved in the theater community. She serves on the Dramatists Guild Council and supports musical theater advocacy through her work on committees such as the Manhattan Theater Club Musical Theater Council. We are very lucky to have someone so talented and well-respected to speak to us today. So please join me in welcoming Susan Birkenhead to the stage.
At this time, welcome Susan for first time in Natyadarpan. I would like CG sir to felicitate Susan.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We have a very exciting program lined up for you today. You not only are going to be able to see 4 incredible plays, but our first program is, in fact, a first for Natyadarpan. This is the debut instance of the Masters Meet interview series, where we get to discuss with a prominent figure in the theater world about their career. We get to gain insights into their creative process and see what they think of the art world as it currently stands. This program is the brainchild of behind-the-scenes powerhouse Sanjay Shetty, who will be interviewing today, as our master is, of course, Susan Birkenhead. Welcome to Masters Meet.
Thank you, everyone. Are you able to hear me? Awesome. I cannot hear myself because I'm so nervous right now. Being on stage is not something I do. But thank you, Susan. Thank you for coming here.
Thank you, Sanjay.
It's an honor for me to be here with you and have this candid conversation.
It's a great honor for me to be here. Hello,
Great.
everybody.
Let's get started. So, Susan, you've had such a long career in Broadway. Could you share some pivotal moments or experience from your early years that pushed you towards this journey?
Well, if I really want to start, during my earliest years, my mother used to take me to the theater. She couldn't really afford the tickets, so we would sit way up in the last row of the balcony. And I remember at the age of 4 or 5, she took me to see a musical. It was, in fact, Oklahoma. That's how old I am. And I was transfixed. I was absolutely transfixed. And from that day on, I would do it in front of the mirror. I would perform all over the house. All I ever wanted to do was be on the stage, dance, sing, act. My parents had other plans. They wanted me to be a musician. And so I was sent to music and art instead of performing arts. But just before I went to college, I was on a date with a guy who went to Brooklyn College, which is where I was headed. And we saw Amal and the Night Visitors, which is a beautiful opera written by Giancarlo Menotti. And I looked at the stage, and that was the first time I just said, I am going to do that. I don't care. I am going to do that. And my very first week in college, I found out where auditions were being held. I went and auditioned for, this was for something else, and I got a part. And the first time I stood on that stage, I said, so this is who I am, and this is where I live.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
That,
So, thinking back from the time and the era that you started, it was a challenging phase. So, it was a lot of challenge for newcomers to break through
Oh,
and
God,
come
yes.
into. So, how did you overcome those challenges? What challenges did you face to break into this industry?
well, first of all, it takes an enormous amount of drive. You have to feel that this is something you must do, not something you want to do. And if you're really driven, you will get up every day, no matter what, and write. Or in the case of actors, it's more difficult because you have to do it in your own bedroom or your own living room. But you feel that if you can't do this, then there's nothing else for you. It has to be that strong a drive. When my son decided he was going to be an actor, I told him that if that was the case, and he was a wonderful actor and had proven it, I said, you've got to live for the first year in the crappiest, crummiest apartment on, in Hell's Kitchen. And you've got to see what it's like to live as an aspiring actor in New York, because it's not easy. And he did it. And at the end of that year, he said, I have not changed my mind. I have to do this. And that's what you have to have. If you can't, or if it's too difficult, or it's not what you were thinking it was going to be, then you're not cut out for it.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And I think many of our youngsters who are here should be listening to this. That's the message. As Susan does a lot of master classes as well in lots of different universities, and where she teaches this craft very passionately. But while during your phase of your struggle, were there any mentors or role models that you followed?
Say that again, Sanjay, I'm
were
sorry.
Did you have any mentors, or did you have any role
Oh,
models?
yes,
that
I
you-
did. I had the most wonderful mentors. I was so incredibly lucky. My first mentor, believe it or not, was Julie Stein. Julie Stein is the man who wrote Gypsy, Funny Girl, and hundreds and thousands of popular songs. He took me under his wing, and I learned more from him than I had learned in all my years of school. Before I met with Julie, I auditioned for a workshop. There is, in New York, a workshop for writers who want to write for musical theater. It was begun by a man named Lyman Engel, who was a famous conductor on Broadway, but who knew what it took to structure a musical, to write a musical. And I auditioned and I got in. And I was there for a year and a half before I was discovered by a woman named Shirley Bernstein, who had read some of my lyrics. She was Leonard Bernstein's sister, and she had an agency. And she fortunately gave my lyrics to Stephen Schwartz and Mary Rogers and people she represented. And so I was asked to participate in a show called Working. But it was during that time I was working with Mary that she called me and she said, Julie Stein is going to call you. And I dropped the phone and I said, Why? She said, just shut up, get off the phone, he's going to call you. He called Steve Sondheim because he wanted a lyricist for something, and Steve was busy, and he said, Mary has a new lyricist, so shut up and answer the phone. So he called, and I went in to see him, and he took me under his wing. And I have to tell you that if Lehman Engel's workshop was my master's degree, Julie was my PhD. He taught me things that nobody who hasn't actually done it teaches. And this is the point I want to make. If you can find a mentor, if you can find among the people you work with, I just want to say that every single person I've worked with, especially directors, if I found them to be really smart, became a mentor of sorts. Even George C. Wolfe, who was much younger than I and had never done anything when we did Jelly's Last Jam, but I sensed in him one part Bob Fosse, one part Hal Prince. He was brilliant beyond words, and I just drank in every word and learned everything I could. I think the point I'm trying to make is you can learn so much from the people you work with. You have to be selective and know which ones are really, really smart. But when you find somebody who's smart, then just hang on every word and learn, drink it all in, and use it.
Great. That's a very, very good advice. Thank you for that. Yeah? Slightly moving to the craft that you are involved in right now, what has your approach been, and has your approach to your specific craft as a lyricist evolved over a period of time as you have done a lot of different work in different decades?
How could you begin the question again, because
Sure.
I think I missed the first part.
Sure. So how has your approach evolved, or has that evolved because you have done so much work over a period of time?
Well, my approach to it hasn't really changed all that much, except that, no, I take that back. Because when I first began, I had this notion, and I think this is true of all budding lyricists, playwrights, actors, whatever it is you do. I wanted the world to know that I was like the best lyricist who ever lived. And so I would work on 37 inner rhymes and make them all perfect. And Julie Stein said to me one day, all right, we all know you went to college. Now I'm going to teach you something. And he gave me a stack of records to listen to. He said, take these home and listen to them. They were all the songs of Irving Berlin. And he said, I want you to learn the genius of simplicity. And it was a real lesson, because simplicity is very difficult, really difficult. And Julie used to say, it only comes at them once, and if they don't get it, they'll never get it. And he was right. And so it was painful, and it took a long time, but slowly but surely, I've been paring things down. The most important thing is what the song is about, and the way in which the song is structured is important, but more importantly, it has to be simple enough so that it can be heard and understood and accessible. And so I've been working for years on that. And I still am working on it. I think I've almost gotten there, but it's a struggle every time.
Awesome. Susan, looking back at your extensive career, what do you consider to be your most significant artistic achievement, and why would you consider it that way?
Well, that's a hard question. That's like saying, which one of your 4 children do you love the most? I love you all. I think probably, and I say this only because it was revived this past year at Encores, but Jelly's Last Jam, which I wrote with George C. Wolfe, who is, I don't know if you know his work, but you should. He's beyond brilliant. He ran the Public Theater in New York for many, many years, too. But I think it was Jelly's Last Jam because I learned so much in the doing of that. First of all, I was the only white person in an entirely black company. And I worked with these people for years. We developed the show over the course of probably 7 years. And I became sort of part of the culture. They were incredibly generous. They sort of put their arms around me and just drew me in. And when I made a mistake, somebody would say, no, you can't use that word, and here's why. And that was a revelation, and it was profound. And the show is just so damn good. I mean, excuse me, but it really is, because George is a brilliant writer. And when they did it at Encores this year, the first time it was done was 1992 on Broadway. And it got great reviews and la-di-da, and that was all wonderful. But this time, I don't know how many of you know what Encores is, but City Center in New York does 3 or 4 old musicals every year. And they reinvent them, or they just do them again. And a lot of them have transferred to Broadway. The first one that transferred successfully was Chicago, which is still running on Broadway. But they've done so many, and last year they did 3 or 4. And then this past year, they chose us. And I watched it carefully. This had a new director. George did not direct this version. But he and I watched it, and we sat there, and it got the kind of reviews you pray for. But the two of us looked at it with, the kinds of eyes you look at your own work with, like, oh, why did I do that? God almighty. And at the end of it, I just looked at him and I said, it's really good. And he said, it's really great. And it's great because he's not only innovative and he's not only brilliant, but he taught me maybe the most important thing I ever learned, which is if you want to really affect your audience, make them laugh like crazy and they'll never feel the knife go in. And it's something I really live by. Comedy is best when it's really dark, because comedy comes from pain. If you really think about it, It comes from a character who is lamenting something, or a character who is confused about something. It comes from pain. If you just want to take a series of gags, it's not going to be funny. But this is one of the things I learned from George. And he has used this, in all of his plays and movies and musicals. And I have as well. Because I think it's really important. Anyway, it's a long-winded answer, and I have a tendency to do that, so forgive me.
No, thank you for that. That was very educational again for all of us. So, for many of us, Encore in India has been adapted and kind of created and recreated what we know as Herbarium by Sunil Barve. So that's kind of the same concept, taking and reviving an old musical and bringing it to life all over again. So I'm glad to see that intercontinental exchange of theatrical ideas.
Yeah.
What would be on the flip side? What would you consider to be the most challenging, or a work that failed and then that kind of contributed to you, to your growth as an artist? Do you have anything that you can share about?
I'm sorry, Sanjay, say it just once more.
Sure. So do you have anything, like we talked about your success, your best play, or your favorite child, do you have a stepchild that you feared, or you think that project that you really wanted to go did not go as you wanted to, and then that enabled you to grow more as an artist?
Oh, yes. Well, let me say this. I do a lot of master classes, and I say this to everyone, and I say this to you no matter what your interest or your participation in theater, whether you're a writer, an actor, a set designer, a costume designer, no matter what you do when it comes to the theater. Talent is important, yes. And if you didn't have talent, you wouldn't be striving to do what you do. But the single most important asset, is resilience. It's the ability to get kicked in the teeth, cry for a day or two, and then get up and say, next. And if you can't do that, or you think you can't do that, then you probably should not be in the theater, because there's more pain involved than there is pleasure. I gave Sanjay a list of 16 musicals that I wrote. 16. Writing a musical takes years and a lot of blood and sweat and tears. There are 16 musicals plus 3 musicals that we never really nailed the rights down for. And out of those 16, very few of them got on stage, very few of them went further on stage, and very, very few of them got onto Broadway and actually made it. Because that's what the business is, and that's how difficult it is. And so you just have to learn resilience. And I promise you, it will carry you through anything. Just a short little note. 2.5 years ago, I was in London doing a show, and I suddenly lost my sight, most of it. I have very, very little left. And I was in the middle of rehearsals, and I was suddenly taken to hospital, and I was there for 5 days. And when I got back from hospital, the phone rang, and it was our director, and she said, so on page 47, where she, and I said, wait a minute, Whitney. She said, no, on page 47, she can't sing that. It has to be him. So you're going to have to change it and make it appropriate for him. And then I want like 2 more verses at least. And I hung up the phone and I thought, God, what am I going to do? And so at first I said, okay, I'll do it in my head. And I hope I can retain it. So I did it in my head. And by some miracle, I was able to retain it. But then I said, oh my God, what am I going to do about changes, about polishing it? But I did it in my head, and I was able to retain it. And then I thought, well, maybe I can scrawl it down, and somebody can try to make sense of it and put it on the computer. So I tried that, but I couldn't really see the pen. And then I thought, markers are really thick and dark. So I got a marker and I did it on larger paper, and voila, it worked. And that's how I finished the show in London. So I'm just trying to say, I came home and I had to go to Chicago to do another show that was headed for Broadway, and this was the Broadway tryout. But I had my marker and I had my paper and I did it. And the fact is, you can. If you have to, you can. If you have the resilience. And so, forgive me, I don't mean to preach, but make sure that you are resilient enough to be able to withstand this business. And if you are, God bless you, and go ahead and do it.
So, one of my favorite playwrights is Murray Sheshkill. I think, Susan, we talked about Murray Sheshkill that you have written
Murray,
for.
Yes.
So the common thread I learned during my interaction with Susan was that she was actually the one who wrote the Off-Broadway musical for Murray's first production that he got paid for, called Love.
Yes.
And I had the opportunity to produce and direct 2 of his one-act plays, The Typist and The Tiger. So that was... What was your experience working? Brilliant playwright, quintessential New Yorker. What was your experience like working with him?
Working with Murray?
Yes.
Well, my writing partner and I, we were brand new. Mind you, we had never done anything. We were in Lehman Engel's workshop. And he said, I have somebody in Canada who wants me to do a small musical. So would you like to do it with me? And I said, yes. So we took Love, which is a 3-person play, one of the funniest plays ever written. And it was very successful as a play, directed by Mike Nichols and starring Eli Wallach and Ann Jackson and Alan Arkin. And so we wrote this musical, and we had to go get the rights from Murray Sheshkill. So we walked into the room, and my first impression was, he's crazy. He looks crazy. I'm sorry, he died. But he was eccentric, deliciously eccentric. And he looked at us like this, and he said, all right, play me a song. So we had a friend of ours, an actress, who was singing it, and Howard sat down and he played the song, and it was a really good song, and it was very funny. And he said, you're gonna make me rich. So I said, well, I don't know if we're going to make you rich, Murray. I would love to make you rich because that means it would make us rich, but, we can try. And he gave us the rights to do it. He just gave us the rights. He didn't charge us for them. And then he came, because he loves his own work so much, he came and sat in back of the book writer and next to me through every single rehearsal. And as the play was going on, he would say to me, "That's funny, isn't it? It's funny, isn't that funny? That's really funny." And it was. I loved him. He was a dear man.
Great. Thank you for sharing that.
So,
Comparing, I'm going to try and switch a bit here. Then versus now. How do you see what's happening and how theater has evolved today versus how it has been in the past? So what's the landscape looking like? Are you seeing positive trends for these upcoming theatrical productions and the upcoming artists? What do you feel about it?
I have very mixed feelings about it because the fact of the matter is that if Jelly's Last Jam were being produced today, I would not be invited to be one of the writers. I understand why, but I think if George C. Wolfe were here, he would say to you, we interviewed a lot of writers, and she was the only white one we interviewed, but she felt right for it. So, and they gave me an assignment. I had to go home and write a very difficult song and scene in 2 days, and I brought it back, and on the basis of that, they accepted me. But that would not happen today. I understand completely why, and it's painful because if you're an actor, you understand that an actor can play anything. If you're a writer, you feel that you can write anything. I've had people call me and say, you have to write plays about women. I mean, you just have to write plays about women. And I said to this feminist group, I write plays about people. I write plays by, for, and about people. And I don't want to be branded as a female writer. I'm a writer. I had Jewish groups say, "Oh, you have to come and you have to write with us. Look, you never wrote anything." And I say the same thing. I do not want to be branded as a Jewish writer, a Jewish female writer. I'm a writer. And if I am invited into another culture, God, I think that's, incredible. If I'm not, I understand in some ways, but I think you have to take it project by project. And at the moment, well, I can't say at the moment, because at the moment we have this crazy person in the White House, and I'm sorry, but but I just think you have to think it through, and I think you have to do it project by project and understand why it has to be somebody who really understands the culture, and somebody who doesn't understand the culture would not be right for it.
Thank you. talking about culture, you had an opportunity to work on the Broadway or off-Broadway creation of the Mira Nair production, Monsoon Wedding. And you worked very closely with Mira and Vishal Bhardwaj.
Yes.
Would you like to share your experience?
Yes. Okay, so this is part of what I'm talking about. There is, I understood this today when I was talking to somebody inside.
Seema.
Seema? Was it Seema who
Yeah,
said
she
it?
was Seema.
That in Indian plays, for the most part, there is a lot of poetry. Whereas in American playwriting or lyric writing, it's storytelling rather than poetry. And there is a difference, and one has to adapt to the difference. I found that, first of all, I have to say that I love Vishal Bhardwaj with all my heart and soul, and that he was one of the best collaborators I ever had. And he took me by the hand and led me into the culture, and we wrote wonderfully together. And I loved working with him. And I loved the cast. What a wonderful, incredible cast it was. And I loved all of them. I got along fairly well with the book writer, who was the original screenwriter, Sabrina Dawan.
Yep.
And Sabrina really helped to explain a lot. Sabrina and I work together as book writer and lyricist have to. And so that was wonderful. But there were five of us really, but three basic people involved in this. The choreographer, the musical supervisor, and me, who were not Punjabi, who were not steeped in the culture, and Mira is, let me say this, Mira is one of the most brilliant filmmakers who ever lived. I think Monsoon Wedding is one of the best movies I've ever seen, and I said at the beginning that I would crawl on broken glass to work on that project, because that's the way I feel about it. But I think that she was out of her element because she was working in the theater, which she had never done.
Right.
And I had never before worked with just sort of poetic lyrics that weren't basically storytelling. And Lauren Lataro, who was our choreographer, had studied Indian dance, really studied it, and tried very hard, but was struggling. And our musical supervisor was struggling as well, even though Vishal was the easiest person to communicate with, because Vishal has worked all over the world, and he's worked on stage and in the movies and everywhere. It became a struggle, and the three of us realized that probably it should be an all Indian or all Punjabi production. That, that we tried, but it probably would have been better
If it had started that way.
if there were other people who really knew what they were doing. And reluctantly, we departed.
Okay.
And I have to say, it's still one of the best movies I've ever seen in my life. I love that cast. I love that company. And it made me sad.
Thank you. Before I move on, I want to give opportunity to our audience. They have been here just to listen to you. So I'm going to ask anyone raise their hand if they have a question for Susan. Please ask away. Anyone? No one?
What was your
Can you raise your hand who's asking?
wow moment? Hi, this is Ragini. Hi, Susan, how are you?
Okay, hi Ragini. She's in the back. Go ahead.
Yes, I just want to ask, what was your best wow moment? And what would be your words to the newest actors or the writers of the theater?
What was your best wow moment is what Ragini is asking about.
My best what?
Wow moment. Wow moment.
As a scriptwriter, your best memorable one that you can still cannot forget.
As a lyricist, your best writing.
My best writing?
Yes.
Oh, God. Okay. Lyrically speaking, it was a show that, well, it has to do with this in a strange way. It was a show that was based on a play by Marivaux, a French writer of the 18th century. And it was directed by Michael Mayer, also a well-known Broadway director. And it was incredibly well received all along the way. And we kept thinking, it's very dangerous. You start to feel, oh my God, the world loves this. This is going to be, the most incredible experience. And then we got to opening night, and all the critics started coming in, and they were all dazzling. And then at 11 o'clock, the producer said, everybody come here. The New York Times just came in. And he hated it. I mean, he didn't dislike it. He hated it. He thought it was dirty. I don't know why. Whatever it was Ben Brownlee. And so it didn't last very long. It closed in 3 months or so. But it was one of those things, and this I tell all of you who have a discouraging experience, it became a cult favorite. It became so much a cult favorite that when my husband was very ill, in fact, he was dying, and it was one of his trips to the emergency room in the ambulance, and we got there, and I was horribly worried about him, and I was holding on to him, and the curtains pulled apart, and a young resident came in, and he looked at me and he said, "You wrote Triumph of Love, didn't you?" And I said, "What?" Because I was really sort of out of it. He said, "You wrote Triumph of Love. It's on my phone. See, I listen to it day and night." And I said, "Could you please, tend to my husband?" And then when I was in Berkeley with Monsoon Wedding, there was a gala, and they wanted all the writers to be at the gala and mix with the rich people who were going to put money in Berkeley Rep. And I was walking around, and I noticed 2 men who kept staring at me. And they were clearly a couple. And then as I moved around the room, I noticed that they were following me. And I thought, this is creepy. And then one of them came up and said, "Excuse me, you wrote Triumph of Love, didn't you?" And I said, "Yes, I did." And it's as if a dam broke, and the two of them were going, "You don't understand. We listen to it all the time. It's the soundtrack of our relationship, and and it went on and on and on. And then they pulled out a velvet box, and they opened it up, and inside it was this brooch. And they said, "Would you take this? We would like you to have this and wear it for opening night." And I said, I can't take that. This is really an antique rhinestone brooch. It's beautiful. And they said, "Please, please, we want you to have it, please." And they pinned it on I was wearing, believe it or not, a kurta, because it was Monsoon Wedding. And they pinned it on. And I did wear it opening night, and I have worn it to many opening nights. And I just want to say it's the power of, sometimes the critics can stomp all over it, and it doesn't stop the public from loving it. It can become a cult classic like that. So, resilience.
So, Susan, with that note, what do you hope your lasting legacy in theatre will be? And what advice would you give as a final note to all the aspiring theatre actors and theatre professionals?
My legacy, God, that sounds so important.
It is, to us.
My legacy, okay. I hope that people love language, that they listen, that when they go to the theater, they listen, that they care about the characters. That, to me, is the most important thing, that they care about the characters, that they become invested in the characters, and that everything I write, no matter what, whether it's funny or dark or no matter what, has heart. I think that's probably I don't know what legacy means, but I guess that would be.
That's very amazing. That's amazing to hear that.
I'm sorry?
No, that's very amazing for us to hear that from you.
Okay.
And what would be your
Okay,
advice?
my last piece of advice. I already gave you the advice about legacy, but this I want to give to you because I gave it to the woman, the wife half of the people who wrote Frozen, the movie, and, let her go, let her go. I was teaching a master class at the Lehman Engel workshop, and she was marrying Bobby Lopez, or she had just married him. And she came up to me and she said, "Can I ask you a personal question?" And I said, "Of course." And she took me aside and she said, another famous Broadway lyricist said to me, "If you really want to do this well, don't have children." And I said, "All right, listen, I have 4 children. It's what keeps me going. It's what makes me human. It's what gives my writing any richness that it might have. I think go ahead and have children, go ahead and live your life to the fullest, because that's what's going to make you a wonderful writer. Not sitting in a little garret and writing, but live your life.
Thank you. Susan, it's been a pleasure and an honor to be here, and we thank you for participating and coming to Natyadarpan. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, this is Susan Birkenhead one more time for Masters Meet.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, I got it. I got it. Okay. All right,
There
just
you
give
go.
me your arms.
Thank you.
Susan, thank you so much again.
Okay, that's all.
It's really not every day that we get to hear from what a mind, what an incredible speaker. Can we please get a round of applause once again for Susan, but also for our interviewer?